Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to today's Community Policing Ad Hoc Committee meeting. Our outgoing chair, immediate past chair, is Commissioner Dorado, but as many of you know, he's off the commission now. But he is going to stay very actively involved in the Community Policing Ad Hoc, and he is actually going to continue his role as being our fearless leader, in the sense that he is going to be leading discussions, etc. The new chair of the ad hoc will be Commissioner Jesse Shea. He is not here today, not able to make it. He told us last time that he wouldn't be here for today's meeting. So I'm just going to call it to order, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Dorado if he would go ahead and I'm losing everything, Rania. I can't find anything, but we were just welcoming back for the first 5 minutes, and that's what we're doing now. So I'm going to welcome everybody on the screen, including those who are not participants in the meeting, but if you're in our listening audience. We are going to talk about where we have been, and I'm going to turn it over to Jose to talk about that and lead us in discussion.
Thank you, Brenda. I appreciate the opportunity to continue leading the discussion. So welcome to everybody that's here. Let me see, open up the, okay. Hey, Joe DeVries, my God. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time, and Paula and Reggie, of course, and Mike. Thank you guys for taking the time. Like I said, I comb my hair just for all you guys. So
and Creighton's there also.
Whatever that means. So,
Creighton's there also. I should have done roll.
Okay.
People
oh, that's right.
There,
I see Creighton now. So let's well certainly welcome to everybody, and again, thanks for your taking the time. What I'd like to suggest to everybody is that we look at banging out at least the rough language of this first section. That is the mission, the values, and the vision, and that we just concentrate on that for the first half hour or so, and see if we can't really come to a pretty solid agreement as to what we can do in terms of this first section. And then we'll go into the real meat of it, and that is the CRO's roles and responsibilities. So let me just start with that. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to take a look at the vision, and this is a format that thanks to Jesse Shea, he put this together, and so it's a matter of our going back over it and seeing what are the things that we agree with, what are the things we want to delete, add, change, etc., and see if we can't come to an agreement as to what we want to see in this first section. So let me just jump right in and say
Jose?
that. Go ahead. Yeah, Mike.
Could you put it on old man font, please?
Thank you.
I see you combed your hair too. You got more of it than I do.
I comb both of them.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
So at least as far as I see it, the essence of what is the idea, I think, in the vision, the mission, the vision, and the values is really to lay the foundation of what we want to be the culture, I guess I could use that word, of community policing as a program. So again, let's just dive right into it. So what are people's thoughts about what you see here And again, hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. Go ahead and jump in at any point. And go ahead, Rania.
Well, Commissioner Dorado, I wonder whether it is, and I see Mr. Lyles has his hand up, so I'll make this comment and maybe Reggie will, maybe this is, anyway, since the last time we looked at this document, I believe a few people have had a chance to get in and make those changes. Yourself, Commissioner Dorado, as well as I think I saw Mariano was in there, and so were you, Joe DeVries. So I wonder, Commissioner, if you can talk us through the comments and the changes that you made. Like, I wonder if those folks can kind of talk us through what's new so that we can react to. Because I certainly haven't had a minute, and my sincere apologies, but that might be an easier way to bring people into this document. Just a thought.
Okay. Reggie.
You know, I hit the wrong button, so I don't have my hand up.
Okay.
Oh, but while you have me here, I've read it a couple times. I like it. I'll just say that.
Excellent. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and just run right through it. One of the things that I put in was what you see in red there on the second line. One of the goals of the Oakland Police Department is to promote and protect public safety while respecting the dignity and rights of all, especially the most vulnerable. And I think I would suggest that that's an important point to put in there, because I think that that's really should be the focus of certainly the CROs and OPD in general, but certainly the CROs in particular, that they're really looking at protecting the most vulnerable, and that can be across the board in terms of what the definition of most vulnerable could be. But I think as a unifying point, that's something that needs to be articulated. So any comments on that?
Well, Commissioner Shea doesn't agree with you on that one. His comment to you, I disagree that this focus is necessary, and that's on, I think, the moment of the especially. I think that, and again, I don't mean to speak for him, but it looks like, I think his concern is that you are targeting instead of keeping it broad. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
Any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I have a thought. I did the job, and we're always supposed to be focused on those who are most vulnerable. I mean, the most vulnerable end up being victims. And we're not supposed to look at people who are victimized by crime or whatever on an equal basis with those who are not victimized by crime. The person who is not victimized by crime really doesn't need the police officer. The person who needs the police officer is the one who's being most victimized. And then, so I think most vulnerable is fine. I also would like to say we want to protect public safety. Could you move the line over a bit? Or can I do it? I seem to be off. Yeah. Protect public safety while respecting the dignity and rights for all, especially the most vulnerable. Yeah, I guess you do have safety in there. That's good.
Let me add, Commissioner Creighton suggested that we say including the most vulnerable rather than especially the most vulnerable. We could play.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I'm not married to especially. Certainly that the most vulnerable be mentioned. And in terms of, I'm sorry, Jesse's not here, but in terms of addressing his point, and I appreciate it, but I think that in terms of community empowerment, if in fact, and again, we're, the definition of what most vulnerable is fairly broad. You know, we can talk about people of color, we can talk about the unhoused, et cetera, as being the most vulnerable victims of crime, et cetera, for various reasons are the most vulnerable. The point being that if in fact the OPD is doing its job, particularly the CROs, they will be, by addressing the dignity and the rights of those most vulnerable, I think will begin to empower those specific elements, and hopefully to the point that they take that power and expand upon it by collaborating and cooperating with their neighbors, again, on a block level, on a beat level, on a citywide level, because in fact they saw OPD in collaboration with the community as a whole, really addressing their issues that are their vulnerabilities. So I have it's an interesting conversation I'd like to have with Jesse about his thinking that including the most vulnerable would be moving away from a community empowerment model, where I see it the opposite. I think that addressing the vulnerabilities of the community on a whole range of levels actually empowers those people that are victims in any number of ways. So I'll leave it at that. Any comments?
If you would, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Paula.
I'd just like to suggest that those things that Jesse has said, we're going to have to wait until he can be involved in the conversation. I think it's kind of useless to carry on a conversation with a person who's not here. And so we're just going to have to power through. I don't think, and I have 2 hours allocated for this meeting. I don't think in that 2 hours, if we spend a lot of time with someone's comments who isn't here trying to argue with those comments, it's not going to make any sense, because Jesse's going to be the new chair. When he comes back, he's going to want to put his imprint on this document as well. And so if we could just move forward to those places that are not in contention with Jesse, I just think it's a better use of our time. That's just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Reggie, did you have a comment?
I agree with Paula.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Then it's a consensus. So let's move on. The department-wide and individual basis, I threw that in. I don't know if that's contentious.
What are you referring to now?
I'm sorry, actively building positive relationships, a member of the community on a.
Okay. Yeah. And my only comment on those is that we will have parallel structure for all of the points, but that's not substantive.
Yeah.
We can, we can work on that. We don't need to take time as a group to do that.
Okay. And I'm looking for the other comment I had put in.
Can we actually just go back up really quickly? So this may be a substantive point. Conduct training and hire officers that reflect the community. What do you mean by that?
Where are you at, Creighton?
That's the second to the last prong. Conduct training and hire officers that reflect the community.
Oh, the second from the bottom?
Second from the bottom, yeah.
Okay.
Ronnie, you are highlighting something else. I'm not sure. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, my thoughts around that is that the community should be reflected in the training and the hiring of OPD officers. In other words, and it's discussed later on in the document that in fact the community be an integral part of the development of curriculum in the academies, in the training, and not only develop the curriculum but also present it. So that's in the way I look at it in terms of training. And of course, the hiring is, I see it that there should really be a pipeline constructed to bring in folks that are either born or raised in Oakland, or better yet, both. But that I think we've all agreed that the OPD should reflect the community as a whole. Creighton?
No, I agree. I think we just have to be really, really tight with the language in any section that we include requirements. So I think it's probably just drafting that we'll have to just tweak. But I think that there can be, and sorry, I have some background noise right now, but I think part of that training could include, reconciliation-based training where folks are, where officers are understanding the history of Oakland and understanding the history of prior police practices, which should inform, how the community interacts with law enforcement currently and how, law enforcement should change based on like a historical understanding of what went wrong previously and what harms occurred, and what should be perhaps repaired in the future.
That's down in the details. I mean, if you read further in the document, there's a lot of that in details in the document. We're just in vision right now, Creighton. This is just vision, and it should
I understand.
Be broad. And
I understand.
So I think the details are what you're talking about there. And I'm kind of opposed to putting details in two places. I like to have the overview at one place and details in another, but that might just be a personal thing.
That makes sense. All I'm saying is that I think we just have to be really tight with the language in the requirement section. So if there's a way to kind of capture all those details in maybe a couple words, whether it's community informed training and hiring officers that have community backgrounds or something like that, I think we just have to be very specific. That's all.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to bring your attention, Joe. Thank you so much. Also put this suggested rewrite.
And I think if we talk about concepts now, we can wordsmith it later on, but we want the community to be involved in the curriculum that's going to be taught, as well as be involved. And we do want the department to focus on hiring officers from the community. So we can word that better though. And I'll be doing a lot of editing and wordsmithing and everything on this so that we can get it. And I'd actually like to see it shorter. There's a lot of redundancy in the policy itself. So if we can do some broad strokes in the vision, and all that would be better. Okay.
So for the most part, are we in agreement in general about the vision so that we can move on to the purpose?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
All right, then let's move on to the purpose. And the things I had were just minor stuff. There's a suggestion regarding the, as you see highlighted, set forth Bureau expectations and responsibilities for community resource officers, foot patrol officers, crime reduction team officers, and other staff assigned to tasks related to 79235. So any, go ahead.
What is 79235? Is there a title of that? Because we're being, like most police officers, always speaking in codes and stuff, and this should be a public document, right, easily read by the neighbors. That's what we want. And so if there's a title for resolution 79235, we can, in parentheses, put that title in so folks can know what we're talking about here.
Okay. The resolution 79235, I don't remember the exact title, but what it is the successor to the original community policing resolution.
It's not Measure Y.
I'm sorry?
Is it Measure Y?
No, that's another one.
But it's right in the line below. Right in the line below, you say community. Right in the line below, you say Oakland Neighborhood Services Division and Resolution, whatever. I mean, isn't that the name of it? I guess not. Sorry.
Let me do that. Can I suggest this? Again, these kinds of things we can clean up later on related to resolution 79235. Do a bracket, insert name of the resolution.
That's
so that we
yes.
will have it there. And so we'll clean that kind of thing up. We don't have to figure, there is a right name of it somewhere. And even if we do it and define the department's role with respect to resolution, the name of the resolution, then we'll do quotation marks, and then we'll refer to resolution and that resolution the same way throughout the policy.
That sounds good to me. Sound good, everybody?
Yeah, whoever reads this ought to not to have to go out and research what that is.
Exactly.
Okay. So we want to go down to the principles. Are we down to, let's see.
Commissioner Dorado, Joe
Principal- yes.
DeVries has his hand up.
Hey, thank you.
Cool.
I put it in the chat. Just, we're going to change resolution 79235 has a very short life right now. I imagine we'll have a new resolution within a year, but it's about community policing, you know? So just by keeping it broad, that's all I was trying to say.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry, just give I wanna acknowledge that Jackie, I see that you've also left me a comment. I'm gonna grab it in just a second. I just want to make sure that I acknowledge the note about the phrase, the community phrase.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
No.
Thank you for being here.
Sorry, I'm so sorry to hold us up. Pastor Jackie, this was around here, correct? Your comment?
Yes, it was.
Agencies.
It had to do with conduct training and hire officers that reflect the community. So it's after the reflect the community
Thank you.
portion.
Received. Thank you.
So Pastor Jackie, does that wording look okay to you?
Yeah, it's fine. I didn't mean to interrupt where we are. I just typed in the chat that if what we really mean by the phrase, when we say hire offers from the community, if that's a reference to diversity, whether it's ethnic diversity, whatever that's referring to, even though you do go into detail further down, there is a way to just kind of make that succinct right there, because the community, you know, can be anything at this juncture. So
Yes, indeed.
I think that's an important distinction that can be addressed later.
Okay, thank you. So if we're good with section 2, that is the purpose. Shall we go on to section 3, the principles of community policing? So as we see, there's a couple of just minor word changes that I put in, but it does touch on the training of OPD in the history of policing in Oakland. So I really like that. And then the red. I'm sorry. Now it's been. I'm sorry. The black was. And now red. Community policing in Oakland means that officers are trained in and engaged in restorative justice-based dialogue, etc. I think that's really, really a significant statement, because we're not just talking about those officers trained in the history and trained in how to relate to the community, but to the extent that they actually are talking in terms of restorative justice. That is, in my opinion, a real game changer. If in fact the community begins to understand through the actions and the collaboration of the CROs and the NSCs, that in fact we're not talking about putting more brown and black youth in jail, or as referring them to the juvenile justice system, but in fact we're talking about restorative justice based principles that talk about restoring the balance within the neighborhood, and have that balance, have those consequences, if you will, be determined by the block, the neighborhood, the beat, the community themselves. And I think that is something that would really impact the the way the community sees OPD and certainly the CROs. So any comments regarding that?
You know, the sentence that says it will require all department members to be trained in the history of policing, you know, is passive writing. Who's doing the training? It seems to me if the police department is responsible for that training, we ought to say the Oakland Police Department is responsible and required to train all of its members in the history of Oakland policing, cultural diversity, and competency and active listening, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As opposed to say it will be required. Then who does it?
Well, I think that's a really good point. And I think that we should just spell out, it should not be, in my opinion, it should not be done by OPD. It should be done by, and we address it further down in the document, it should be done by community folks that are have a particular expertise in. Go ahead.
Okay. I think if this is successful and we are successful and following generations are successful, then OPD changes, the culture changes, and it can be able to do this training in conjunction with the community. I'm not saying that that OPD is going to be recalcitrant and refuse to be trained. That our goal is to have the department do this work, you know, along with the community, to value it, to see it, to be right. And I think we ought to spell it out. So if it said Oakland Police Department, along with the community, selected members are to do this training.
So it'd be a collaborative effort between the community and OPD to present to OPD in general, and certainly the CR
Right,
in particular.
Because I don't want that either or thing that we're going to be faced with. You know, we have, somebody has to change, and the change has to be the Oakland Police Department. That culture has to change, and
Absolutely.
we'll know it has changed when it's doing the work itself.
Okay.
Respectfully, though, you're asking to enforce, the policy is enforcement. You're asking for enforcement of a practice that doesn't exist yet. And with no one here from OPD, I don't know what it would like. They'd have to design a program that allows community collaboration with their training. And
I thought that's what we're doing.
We're not design. Well, I've got no one from OPD here committing to designing a training program with the community, though. But you're doing the policy that enforces that practice without the practice.
Oh, actually, you know, they had one of them at Brides was there doing training.
Ben McBride.
Yeah, Ben McBride, member of the community, was there doing training, and I don't think he still is, but I do know that he was doing it for a long time. So there is a precedence for this, and also what we're doing is we're asserting a policy. I think we have to own our own power and understand that if it is the policy that they should be working with the community, that they will be working with the community, because this is a policy which we would be enacting. Thank you.
Joe, did you have your hand up? Did you?
I do. Yeah, this is a no-brainer. We don't need to argue over it. We've had the CPAB members come in and conduct trainings with OPD. We've had other members of the public come in and teach at the academy. And I think we need more of it. And quite frankly, OPD would probably love it if somebody could come to them with a complete curriculum so they wouldn't have to develop it. And, you know, I worked with DC Bolton a few years ago when the CPAB even approved a training program they brought in. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. The department should and can and will continue, you know, to have community members come in and do training. We just need to make sure it's really competent and effective.
Right.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that part of it. But I think that if we're talking about a real deep, honest, comprehensive look at OPD history, it is going to get uncomfortable for them. And so there's going to have to be a real, I think the key word is collaboration between the community, obviously competent, you know, people that really have specific expertise in that, together with, people in the OPD that are really open to that kind of collaboration. If we're talking about a real deep dive into OPD history, we're talking about, Bobby Hutton getting killed. We're talking about Panthers. We're talking about a whole lot of uncomfortable stuff. So I think the key word and I would suggest we go ahead and move on, so long as we understand that this is a collaborative effort and we actually use that word in this whole point. So what do you think, Reggie?
Yeah, I agree. But I think we won't know we've made any success until they're doing it themselves. And so I see that, look, if you disagree with this, then you don't get promoted. You disagree with this, then you don't get special assignments. If you disagree with this, then we don't select you as a potential chief of police. You disagree with this, we don't select you as a potential candidate to be a police officer. So over time, the culture shifts. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable at the beginning. And to that, I say, so be it. Let's get on with it.
Indeed. So, Rania, can you select, if long as Reggie's okay with it, just put in collaborative, some phrase like collaborative effort. So it's understood.
Here's what I put.
Okay, collaborative. Well, okay. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd add to that? Or again, I know we're not necessarily wordsmithing, but did I capture the sentiment at least?
Yeah, I just didn't want it to be a passive sentence. That we ought to know who's doing the training.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask one?
Go ahead, Brenda.
Jose. In terms of the language, the third line on your red, community policing, justice, and then it says iterative adjustments. What is that? And I say that because we want the public to understand what it is we're saying.
Amen.
And most of the folks here are going to say, scratch their head, what is iterative? So overall, and when I go through for final edits, I'm going to be looking for some simplified language that common everyday people can understand. So I'm not sure what that iterative adjustments means, but we just highlight that.
Look it up.
I have to be honest and say I looked it up and now I forgot what the hell the damn definition was.
Okay, all the more reason. So we just highlight that. That'll come out and we'll put it in plain language, in plain English.
Yeah, you want to put an underline or quotes on that?
Frequentive.
Dan, it's highlighted with a comment.
Okay, great. All righty. So moving on from there, community policing will recognize the links between U.S. Wait a minute.
Where are you? Hang on.
I would just reading from where you had it highlighted.
Okay.
So where am I now? The links between, and this is part of what I put in. Community policing will recognize the links between U.S. and Oakland history, systemic racism, poverty, and issues of crime and quality of life in Oakland. So that was something I thought that that needed to be said very plainly, that these are the program of community policing will recognize these links, that there are definite connections between U.S. and Oakland's history. And again, it goes back to the kind of training that will be a collaborative effort between the community and OPD of police officers, particularly CROs, that there's definite links that have to be recognized in what they do and how they talk to folks about the history of in the United States and certainly in Oakland, and systemic racism, poverty, and issues of crime and quality of life in Oakland, because there are definite links that have to be recognized and dealt with. And it links directly to what I think the CROs and certainly the NSCs do and say. So that's why I suggested that. And then it goes on about community policing will include the repair of historical harm done by OPD, as well as mitigating unintended consequences and further harm in OPD practices, procedures, and policies. And at this point, on that specific point, I'd like to hear from Pastor Jackie. How does that sit with you, Pastor?
It's sitting fine for now.
Great.
I'm ruminating. I am ruminating.
Okay, thank you so much. So any other questions or comments on this specific paragraph and these sentences? If not, we're going to go ahead and move on. Any comments or questions on this?
One
Oh,
clarification.
go ahead, Brenda.
Is what's in red going to substitute for the paragraph above, or what are we? That's an additional paragraph in addition to the
Yes,
one.
yes, ma'am. That's the way I saw it.
Okay, all right. And I'm going to suggest that probably at some point we synthesize the two, because we have in the above paragraph, we train in the history of policing in Oakland, cultural diversity. And so in the next one, we're talking about the links between the US and Oakland history, systemic racism, poverty. So I think that we should find a way to make one paragraph.
Great.
That would be my suggestion.
Okay, I think that's a good one. Any other comments on that specific paragraph? If not, let's go ahead and move on. Go ahead and go down, Rania, to the yellow. There you go. So community policing in Oakland means a commitment. I think this is from, if I'm not mistaken, this is from Creighton. Community policing in Oakland means a commitment to working in partnership with the impacted community to repair the harm, regardless of where the harm originated from. That, the department, I'm not sure about that. At a minimum, listen to and understanding the harm that occurred, making sure the harm does not occur again. Community policing in Oakland means that officers are trained. Well, let me stop right there.
Probably this means that the department at a minimum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So obviously this was talking about much of the sentiment of the last sentence of the previous paragraph. So this may well be something that you look at, Brenda, in terms of integrating it into one paragraph. Pastor Jackie, is this closer to what your thoughts were about how to articulate the harm that's occurred and how it should not occur again? Is this more language that you're in favor of versus the language of the last sentence in the last paragraph?
I am more in favor of this language only because it is more specific. I see Creighton's name in parentheses there, that this came from him, but I did think there needed to be just a bit more clarity. But I also recognize Judge's opinion that some of this can be combined, because we've referenced restorative justice probably about 3 times now.
Yeah.
And so
exactly.
I do think that it can be made more succinct
Yep.
without losing the clarity of expectation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with that. Actually, this wasn't language that I actually typed in. This maybe came from comments that I had made in a previous meeting. So this shouldn't be seen as gospel here. Obviously, it could be incorporated, just as Pastor Jackie said.
We just wanted to blame you, Creighton. That's all.
Yeah, I could say that.
And I want to offer a semantical statement. If you don't want something done, you put in the word should to police officers. That means we don't have to do it. We ought to do it, but we don't have to do it. So either if you're not strong enough to say shall, don't say it at all. It has to be clear, succinct, and take those outs out of the policy.
Yeah.
So of course they shall listen. That's what we pay them for. So they can't say, I'm not listening to you. So that's my statement.
No, I think that's a good one. Yeah, if you don't want them to say it, to do it, then don't.
Say should.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're okay to move on, let's go to the second part. No, go ahead and go down. Rania, I just want to go back over that last paragraph. Starting with community policing. Community policing in Oakland means that officers are trained and engaged in restorative justice based dialogue. We've already touched on that, I believe, and solicit feedback from dialogue with and solicit feedback from community members in the matter allows for iterative, there's that word again, iterative adjustments to OPD practices, procedures, and policies. So Creighton, does this, the rest of it hosted by neighborhood councils, et cetera, is that a particular point where you're talking about having OPD and the neighborhood councils have a place where this dialogue occurs, and also the feedback from the community occurs in these spaces hosted by neighborhood councils, and you have the sergeants and patrol captains. Was that what the thought was here, Creighton?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've looked at, well, I haven't actually looked at this, so I can go in and clean up some of the language, but I think the thought is that I think there's an important aspect of reconciliation that needs to occur, and an understanding of some of the harms that have occurred, and a space for community members to share those harms with law enforcement officers, and have law enforcement officers listen and better understand the impact of some of the practices and actions that law enforcement officers have taken. And for those spaces to occur in a specific neighborhood where like the actual action or harm originated. So it would be a more intimate setting and an intimate process than just the complaint process that we see through the CPRA, where people, submit a paper complaint and it goes into the abyss, and there's no healing or feeling of justice that comes out of that process, whether or not the complaint was founded or not. I think people go through that process and don't come out of it feeling like there's been any kind of real resolution. And this offers a way in which people can be validated and legitimized and heard, and have their concerns actually responded to. Yeah, I think I can build this out, and we're thinking about this more deeply with the CPAB, but that's the general gist.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. And let me say real quickly why. Because we're talking about a process that injects restorative justice dialogue. That is, and OPD is a part of that. So we're actually talking about, in my view, you're having let's say at a block level, you're having a dialogue around somebody they're playing they're blasting their music at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so what does the block think that should be the restorative justice consequence of that? Maybe clean up trash for the next month or two rather than paying a fine or going to jail. So you have that, and also in combination with that, you have feedback going from the community to OPD via the CRO, certainly listening. So you have those two things that I think are important elements in terms of any sort of a safe space that's being created for that to occur. So I really like the idea of articulating in some place in the document that this will happen. Not should happen, will happen. So anyhow, I'll leave it at that. Any further discussion or comments on this section? Okay, Rania, you want to move down a bit? Okay. Yeah, commitment to repair. I'm going to go ahead and skip past. We started with should, so I think that needs to go. So these are comments from Mariano and Reggie, and and who was it above?
Joe DeVries.
Oh, Joe DeVries. Okay. So any further clarification, Reggie? Mariano obviously not here on what you wrote there, Reggie.
Is it up in front of us? Can I see it? Okay. Well, I said will, I would put shall.
Okay.
And before we came on, I added this ethical qualifications and the desire to serve. There's a lot of people who are qualified to serve, but they have, maybe racial animus. So they may be qualified. We don't want them to serve. So they have to have a desire to serve, and they have to have some ethics about them. In other words, we don't find, like you have when you look across police agencies across this United States, FTOs, trainers being the ones who garnered the most citizen complaints. So I see you laughing, Jose, but those are facts.
It's true.
Well, if you did analysis on, and one was done on San Francisco Police Department and Oakland Police Department, that the majority of the FTOs were the ones who, when they were officers, got the most citizens complaints, and they promote them, the FTO, to replicate that culture. So we want to be able to make the department responsible for not putting people like Chauvin in positions of trainer.
Yeah, the first thing I heard that a lot of the FTOs in OPD would say was, forget what you just learned, everything you learned in the academy. And I'm going to tell you how it really is.
Exactly.
And that's a replication of the culture that you're talking about. So certainly.
Precisely.
Yeah, certainly that's, I think that's exactly what has happened over the years.
So when you make it the responsibility of the chief to promote and to, folks who are ethical, they get more money. So people say, well, this is how I got to behave. They don't have to believe it. That's their business. But I want them to behave ethically.
Certainly agree with that. And they should have, for those people who really want to do the job because they believe it, those ethics should hold and be rewarded, with, as you say, not just pay, but, assignments, promotions, etc., evaluations, right down the line.
Every officer is looking for the path to become the chief or the captain or whatever. What is my track? How do I get there? Mm-hmm. This should be a way of getting there, and then you change people's behavior.
Yep.
Slowly but surely.
Yeah. Either the carrot or the stick. Okay. Any comments on what Reggie put in as his piece right here? Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah, I was thinking about when I read Reggie's piece earlier. I mean, I completely agree with him. But so one of the parts of having community policing experiences that they have tenure. I think this came from Jesse also. And at some point, are we going to include community policing experience for promotion, for assignments? Are we going to ever be able to say that all command officers have community policing experience by the year 2030? Is it going to be included on your performance evaluation? Is there going to be a special place for community policing experience? And are the neighborhood crime prevention councils going to be involved in the performance evaluation process?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes on everything except the actual deadline for command staff to complete a quote community policing program, let's say. But certainly
it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be that date, but I think we should have some date in there where that's our ambition, is to have before you can be promoted to a command position, you must have had community policing experience as an officer or as a sergeant.
I certainly agree with that. Joe, and then Lieutenant Febble.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. I just inserted that part about merit-based assignment, just because, but by the way, I agree with everything you guys are saying. It's just, I know that typically the CRO position was not merit-based, so people are just kind of picking based on schedules. And by making it merit-based, there's that screening process that I think you guys are looking for, that there's some set of qualifications that people have to try to compete for these roles. And then you, of course, further down, you lay out a lot of it, having a community policing exam. It's beautiful work. And since I have the floor, I'll say, once I got past this part of the document, I didn't make any other changes because I thought what you wrote was amazing. I mean, I think this thing is almost ready to go. It really, I saw a lot of good stuff. And then, oh man, what was the other point I was going to make? I just think, merit-based, that's what I was going to say. If you actually look at who's risen in the ranks of OPD, it's, community policing absolutely gives people, upward mobility. I mean, look at Lieutenant Febble, Deputy Chief Bolton. I mean, the list of officers that rise through the ranks faster because of their community policing experience it's tested already. So I think putting it in and codifying it is great.
Thank you, Joe. Lieutenant Febble, thank you for joining us.
Hey guys, I apologize for my tardiness. Saturdays can be tough when you're running around with the family, I tell you what. So I definitely want to agree with Joe. I think, and it's happening to me literally right now as we speak, is the system that we have in place now for the CROs, which is just an order of merit list. Essentially, the first person who puts their name on the list, they're next up for a CRO. There's no real vetting process in that. A merit-based system would be very powerful because it can get the people that we know are the best community engagers, the people that genuinely want to be CROs. They're not the people who are just using it as a platform to lift into a different position, such as CRT or the BCOC. And it also, like you guys said, it also allows us to get people with the highest ethical standards. So like right now, as the department is dealing with all of our staffing challenges, outside of my choice, I was given my current sergeant staff going into 2022. And it was unfortunate because I had a sergeant who is very in touch with my local community, is abreast of all the issues, and I couldn't keep him. I had to forfeit him, and that I was disappointed. And of course, I'll make do with what I have to do. But I also believe that if we have a merit-based system based on a test, while the MOU doesn't allow me to mandate anybody to stay beyond a year, the merit-based system would allow me to get officers who would give me their word, the ethics portion of this, that they're in it for the long haul. And then the other question that came up, which is a great point, which everybody wants our current leadership and our future leadership of this department to be involved heavily in the community and to understand the needs and the desires of the community, to reshape the culture of the department towards our ultimate goal. So two things are going on, prior to COVID, and it's now finally coming back, is that officers are required to attend quarterly meetings, community meetings, and we document that. So community contact and orientation with our policing partners as well as the citizens is always going to be in the culture of the Oakland Police Department, even if they're not in CROs. But it is without question, the folks that do go into the CRO program seem to be very successful in the testing processes to promote. Because as the one gentleman said, I apologize, I can't see his name right now. We want community policing to be the heart of the department and the heart of people who are being considered for promotion. And I've been very fortunate in the last two tests that I've taken over the last 6 years. They've been very driven on community policing principles. So folks who have not been community policing officers, they tend to have more challenges passing those tests or even getting the higher ranks on those tests. So I think a combination of a merit-based list, allowing the best folks to become CROs, gives them the best opportunity for promotional exams in the future. So it all works together. It's a nice little cog.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Joe, do you have another comment?
I did. I just want to thank you, Lieutenant Bevel, for underlining like merit-based system. Like it's a very technical thing that we have to have in there. And it's unfortunate. The CPAB actually made this recommendation to OPD about 4 years ago. So it's a bummer that it hasn't been codified. So I think this is a great opportunity. And then I think something else the Lieutenant said that we should touch on about the MOU not allowing, placing limits, so that officers can transfer out. I mean, sorry, this is an aside, but it's not part of the policy. But I think that MOU, I think these issues that often hit the MOU brick wall need to be talked about during the MOU process, and so they need to be flagged. And I think that connection, so that at the negotiating table these issues are talked about, I think is really important. And again, not talked about in a in a conflict way. When people think of labor negotiations, a lot of people think of conflict. I think of collaboration. And so, but I've been at this a long time, and you always hear about the MOU, but then when it comes time to negotiate the MOU, you don't know if these issues ever got raised at the table. So I don't know if there's a place for that in the policy, but there's my editorial.
I think that's a good point, Joe, because like going into 2022, I started off with 16 CROs. I'm going to have 3 return for 2022. And I'm getting some very talented potential replacements, but it takes time to really train these guys up. There's so many resources out there. And as I was explaining in another meeting, Joe was kind enough to put on a formal training at the beginning of the year that really increased our operational efficiency for CROs. But then when they all leave right after, it's I try and stay positive about these things, but it is challenging. And I would really like to see that change, but that's an MOU issue. That's very much above my level at this point. But you guys are all thinking exactly how I'm thinking. It's good to hear.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Great point, Joe. I appreciate bringing that up. Any other comments on we went quite a bit up the field on Reggie's comments, but they're all good points. Any other comments? We're now at the 3-year commitment, 5-year commitment, etc. As you see here, community, this is exactly what we're talking about. I'm sorry. So we're talking tenure and commitment to the program. So any other comments regarding that? That section right above that, Rania? Yeah, right there. So any other comments regarding this paragraph?
Just one, Jose, and it follows up on what Lieutenant said. Not only does it take time to train them, it takes time to build trust and confidence, so that the community can say, yeah, this is my guy, I can trust this guy. This is my lady, she's going to do by me what's right. And 1 year is not a very long time, especially coming in with the reputation that we see on television nowadays. So to build confidence in the officer, you can't expect them to get out there and have enough interaction in 1 year with all the other responsibilities they have to build up that trust and confidence.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. That it does take time to develop that confidence. And that's part of my vision, is that in fact, we see the CROs working along the lines of what we're putting down here in black and white. I think that we're going to see that those relationships grow, and I think fairly quickly, as well as the trust as a result as well. And all of that is exactly what we want to see happen. Anything else on the tenure, the 3-year commitment, et cetera, and what's and that was a good point about the neighborhood council input on performance evaluations. That I think is really a cog in the wheel of community empowerment. So I'm glad to see that there. It's a really good point. Any other comments on this before we move on? If not, let's go ahead and, Rania, let's go ahead and move down. So we have we have suggestions from our last meeting, which was the active building with relationships with members of the community on an agency basis, on an individual basis. I think we touched on that in the vision. Active relationship building by the department, we touched on that as well. Scope, entire police department versus CRO specifically. I think again we touched on that in the mission. Coming into the department, blah blah, is also touched on in the mission. And culture change versus individual policy. I think we touched on that as well. So I think if there's no comments on this, I think we can go from there to the CRO roles and responsibilities. Any comments on that part? The suggestions from Saturday meeting, the last one we had.
Yeah, I'll just say that it is what, 3:12 or so, almost 3:15.
Oh,
And we thought we'd allocate 45 minutes to CRO roles and responsibilities. So obviously not going to meet that today, but I think we can start talking about that section.
yeah, thank you for the time check. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes.
So let's jump right into to that section. Roles and responsibilities, community resource officers generally. Did you want to put that back up, or should I just go ahead and
I think so. Yeah.
Rania?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Great, thank you. So community officers generally, community resource officers generally, every Oakland Police Department sworn police officer is a community policing officer. Thus, it is the responsibility of all department officers, members, regardless of rank, position, or unit of assignment, to positively engage members of the community with the goal of fostering productive relationships and a collaborative effort to promote safe communities. Again, I think the mention of relationships, and of course this is in a positive sense, and a collaborative effort. I think those are important words, and it's not an option. It's put in such a way that this is what will happen. So go ahead and go up. Any comments on that paragraph? And I'm not sure what the thought was behind anti-insubordination language. Does anybody have a comment on what that? Because I'm not sure what the thought was behind that.
Commissioner Dorado, this is Commissioner Shea's suggestion.
Ah.
All of this is from Commissioner Shea.
Okay.
So you might want to hold on that.
Okay. I certainly will ask Jesse about this. So moving on to, however, not every sworn officer, police officer is a community resource officer. Community resource officers have specialized training and experience that permits them to focus problem-solving activities on community identified priorities or priorities that affect the safety and well-being of the community in a given area. Some of this training includes, but is not limited to, and here's where I had a suggestion under the identification and utilization of community resources. I would suggest that we make it clear that the community resources can be the city, county, state, federal, public, private, etc., across the board. That in fact, these community resources run the gamut.
Did you want that noted?
If you want, if you could put just city, county, state, federal, public, private.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rania. Any comments on that thought?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. So I just think it's too much. I think that it's very hard to focus in and to say what are the 5 important things or what are the 6 important things. I think when you give a laundry list like this, that is a lot. It's a lot of training. I think a committee like this, the whole impetus of the committee is to throw ideas out. Oh, we need to do that. Oh, they need to do this. Oh, they need to do that. Oh, they need to do this. But honestly, these are human beings. And one of the things that my own neighborhood council complains about is that our community resource officer is so often in some training or another. So there's that trade-off between how much training do you put people in, how much time do you have for them on the street, and what are the most important things. And I know it's hard to determine the most important things, but I think a long list like this is just, it's just too much. I mean, and what does it mean to be trained in crime prevention? My gosh, there are professors who teach 2-semester courses in that. I mean, you know, I mean, it just, if we are to be taken seriously, we've really got to pick out 4 or 5 things that are the most important things that we think that the community resource officers should be trained in. And instead of having this broad, I mean, problem solving techniques. Gosh, I'd like for my son to take that. He's having trouble with his teenage daughter. You know what I mean? I mean, there's just things in here that I just think, yes, it's a great idea. Every one of them is a great idea. But our job is to focus down on how many? 5, 6, 10, I don't know. But I see this list and I think that's too much. And I just don't think it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I think that's a great point about, you know, the training time versus the time on the street. So I definitely think that's something to keep in consideration. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mike was next, and then
Okay.
Lieutenant Fable.
Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you, Brenda. I appreciate it. I agree with what Paul is saying. And when it came to, you know, the state agencies, federal agencies, I think a lot of that stuff, in my vision, is something that the NSCs do. I mean, it would be good if the cop knows the guy in Public Works who can get something done. But, you know, if I'm in Public Works and I'm getting a call from an NSC whose boss is Joe DeVries in the city manager's office, I'm going to be a lot more responsive, you know, to that phone call than, you know, especially if I got several coming from different officers. And I think you get to coordinate the activities, and also Joe's people get to see where there are clumps of problems that can be solved more systemically. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant Fable, and then Pastor Jackie.
Yeah, you know, I think that that everybody has a good point on this one too. But I do have to go with Paula in that every one of these line items here is extremely important. But what we do have is we have ongoing procedural training. Like, all officers are trained extensively in procedural justice, which encompasses community harm topics, harm reduction, cultural diversity, and competency. So my point is, I think that all of these are actually achieved within our CROs and are a part already of our annual and ongoing curriculum of the department. So I could have our training unit put an outline out of our continuous training, which encompasses many of these things. And perhaps the ad hoc can find the 4 or 5 items that typically a CRO would not get from continuous training. Because, like, we get customer service training. Of course, you want to provide our citizens with customer service, but customer service for a CRO is much more intensive than a patrolman. Public speaking, right? That's a big one. We don't teach patrolmen public speaking. So that's something that's unique. So my point is that many of these our officers are going to get no matter what division that they're in, but there are some unique integral skills that CROs need to have to be successful that I believe that we could focus on.
I think that's a really good suggestion. I really appreciate that. Go ahead and send that list to us, please, Lieutenant. And Pastor Jackie.
I am adding my voice to the choir, but for another reason. I think it's important for the document to be consistent. And I think in terms of listing trainings, there are things that we have listed that are not on this list that perhaps should be repeated. So in keeping with what Lieutenant Fable just said, Restorative justice would be great. This could be a place where you included the history of policing as a training, would be great as something specific, you know, or just something that doesn't list kind of what they're already doing. And then also, I think listing this out changes the feel of the entire document. We have talked about wanting the document to depend on relationship, but a customer relationship is very different than a community relationship. And so I think there's some things that some ideas and some issues and even some training references that were listed earlier up that could be identified and speak to what Paula said, narrowing it down to that clean 4 or 5 areas that are specific and unique to the CRO. And I would echo also, I think, was it Mario that said it? It wasn't Mario. Who mentioned not having officers have to know all of these different things? That I echo that as well, because in my personal experience, all the officer said to me was call Joe DeVries. And I called Joe DeVries and the earth moved. So I do think that relationship, that might be a burden or maybe an unrealistic expectation that can't be realized given all the other work. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, great.
Any thoughts you have along those lines, Pastor Jackie, please, if you would, take the time to.
Yes, I
us
will
know.
do that. I'll add some ideas. And then I also noted going back up that we add some reference to the vision. When you have that initial statement, not in this area, but I think up further, when I make the reference to the vision, it is the statement before this, because you are so specific in your vision statement that in addition to saying with the goal of fostering productive relationships and collaborative effort to promote safe communities, kind of the definition of that or how that plays out is listed in your vision. So whether it says as reflected in the vision or but just refer back to that. So there is no lack of clarity as to what the expectation is by what is meant by productive relationships and collaborative effort for safe communities. And I will send my thoughts around those 4 or 5.
Okay. And Ronnie, I think she means in section 1. She was talking about in section 1 when we talk about.
No, I mean in section 2, this opening
in section
paragraph
2,
that
okay,
references every
Oh,
police
that one.
department.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right, sorry.
Thank you,
No
Pastor
worries.
Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
If there's no other comments on this list and what went prior to it under community resource officers generally.
You have
let's
other
move-
comments. I
Joe,
see,
go ahead.
Lieutenant
Okay.
Preble and then Joe DeVries.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just can't help it. I'm trying to not talk too much, but I just want to really lift up how important it is that they identify that the training on this list is important. But what I find is when an officer knows what to ask for from the rest of the city, that officer is a more effective problem solver. And one of the problems we have is officers not knowing what the rest of the city, who can solve a problem, and not just to call the NSC, but so that when they're in the street and they see a problem, like, and this happens for me all the time. It's perfect example. Public Works has one truck that picks up mattresses and a different truck that picks up garbage. So the mattress truck shows up and picks up the mattresses, but there's a whole bunch of garbage left behind, and no one thought to go, oh wait, we need this other group to call as well. And that's the sort of failure at problem solving that we often trip over in city government. And so I think to the extent officers understand who does what in every other department will make them just better at problem solving. I don't know if that's all included in that first bullet. I think ongoing city academy for officers is really important.
Yeah, I was going to say that maybe that can be one of those specific areas that we list out. That would be unique, even though desirous for all officers, certainly unique to CROs.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
That's true.
And Joe is right, because we've had that complaint ourselves. It was right there. Why didn't they just take it all? So very true.
Yep.
And maybe the CRO should have a laminated card in their uniform pocket somewhere. For mattresses, call this, and for whatever, call that. For neighborhood fence disputes, call this. So that's a thought, though. All right.
That's a very
good.
good thought.
Lieutenant, who is next? Lieutenant?
I think Lieutenant Fable, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would like essentially a hybrid training between what Mr. Dorado had said before, as well as what Joe said. The most effective training that I've seen and I've received as a community resource officer myself is the city entities that are out there that are available for the resource to exercise, to delegate out so that we can maximize efficiency. But another training that I would like to incorporate as ongoing, Mr. Dorado brought up, is we should be training our CROs on what projects were successful, what brought success, and how we can replicate. Also, which projects were unsuccessful, what made them unsuccessful, and should we not attempt to replicate those, or how can we make them successful in the future? I think a hybrid training of the year during that would be immensely effective at bringing these new guys up to speed, and as well as refreshing our tenured officers.
That's what's so important about your being here, Lieutenant, because we really appreciate those kinds of points, because you're seeing it from from the street level. It's really that's a great deal of value in what you're saying. Yeah, I certainly have to agree with all that. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Jose. I agree with what the lieutenant said, but I think a phone call that works is not a Sarah project, but I think we need to find a way of capturing that activity so that the officer, is rewarded, or it's recorded that this officer did this, he solved this problem. He may have done it in 5 minutes, but nevertheless, he solved that problem and he deserves credit for it in his performance evaluation.
I couldn't agree more. I said it more than once. Yeah, we're not real good. We, the community, not real good at getting rid of the bad officers, and we're not real good at recognizing the good officers. And we have to be much better in both ends. Any other comments on this list and what went prior to it before we move on to the next paragraph? And we're at what time are we at? We're almost at 3:30.
Almost at 3:30.
Yeah. If no other comments on this list here, let's go on to these trainings should, whenever possible, include content and curriculum built and presented by diverse community representatives and organizations. Supervisors and commanders of CROs should identify training which will enhance the professional development of CROs. CROs should identify training which will enhance their development or job performance and submit training requests for consideration. In all cases, CRO training shall involve community resources to the greatest extent possible. And you want to go down a little bit? Positive and learned de-escalation applications and field experience should be taken back to the department for scaled practices. De-escalation training should always be paired with implicit bias training, and specifically racial biases. So I don't know who put that in. Anybody can, whoever, any comments on those particular two sentences there in red?
Mariano did that, it seems.
Mariano?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
I think, I don't know, I see this.
Lieutenant, what do you think of that, of those two sentences? What's your thoughts around that?
No, I think they're very important trainings, but they're already a part of our curriculum. And I think a lot of these training needs assessments, you will be positively satisfied to see that we have that already as a part of our curriculum. I'm going to have our training coordinator, Lieutenant Brian Hubbard, give us an outline of all these requests and the training that we have and the training that we have ongoing. And so that hopefully it'll satisfy the ad hoc that they're actually going to get the best folks who already have implicit bias training and procedural justice training and so on and so forth.
Great. I'm looking forward to seeing that. So thank you so much. Any other, you want to go up a little bit, Rania? Thanks. My only suggestion was we eliminate whenever possible and just make it and eliminate should via Reggie's comments and just replace that with shall. And eliminate whenever possible, not to take away that wiggle room. Just say these trainings shall.
That's in the first sentence. Yeah, that's in the first sentence, Rania. It
It's a
says
third-
these
I
terms.
got you, thank you. Yeah, this, yeah.
There you go. Excellent, thank you. So any other comments on this section? Yeah, anything on the last two sentences of this paragraph that Lieutenant Feble just commented on? Okay, if not, then let's move on to qualifications and respect everybody's time. Do we want to continue for another, I don't know, 15 minutes? Is everybody okay with that?
I'm gonna have
Okay.
to bug out in about 5 or 10, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I think I have about 10 more myself, and then I'll have to leave you.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Jackie. So let's move as quickly then as we can. This is one question I had for Lieutenant Feble. What number of years of law enforcement experience do you think a CRO should have?
This is a great question. So it's been my experience that very rarely will I get somebody volunteer to be a CRO with 5 or more years on the department. I find that the enthusiasm is particularly strong among officers in the 2 to 4 tenure mark. These are the officers that have got the competency of patrol down, and now they're looking for a little something different, but not necessarily as high speed as our ceasefire teens or VCOC. These are folks that are more on the service-oriented side of policing, but want to get a different experience than patrol. So it actually really is a niche position. But I have to be honest with the group here. Recruiting the CRO is difficult because it does require a lot of skill sets. It requires, time management, community engagement, thinking outside the box, working with a lot of city entities. And some people are intimidated by that. And so recruitment is always been a challenge, but I'm up for that challenge. So that's the answer. It's 2 to 4 years, sir, is our predominant volunteer group.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
We
Paula.
say so shall we say a minimum of 2 years? Minimum of 3 years law enforcement experience?
Well, that's a great question, right? Because ideally we want the people who are the most competent patrolmen who've done the job and understand it. But if we put minimums on, like if we say you should have 2 to 3 years experience, that's great. Because every once in a while we'll get like a Farhang or a Schmarzo who come to this department and they just hit the street running. These are sharp individuals. They're very good community engagers. And sometimes they may only have 18 months. And if they want to volunteer to come to my team, I'll take them in a heartbeat. They're that good. I could train them. I would rather have one of them than somebody who's been on 7 years and is just salty about the job. That's just.
And the only reason I was suggesting that we do a specified minimum is rather than 2 to 3 years, or like a range. If you do a minimum, you're going to get the 3 years. And you can determine whether you want the person at 2 years or 3 years or 4 or 5 years. But I think that we should specify a minimum.
I think that's a good idea, and I think that can certainly be a strong point in the merit-based process that we're discussing. A part of the interview, you can award points for tenure. I think that could be an effective tool.
Yeah. So, Rhonda, let's change that to at least 2 years or a minimum of 3 years long. Is 2 years good for you?
And I've also added should have at least 2 to 3 years of law enforcement or proven track record of exceptional service. Again, rather generic, but it captures that sentiment that I think Lieutenant Feble was sharing regarding, like, if you don't have that time, if you are newer but happen to be a bit of a rock star in this space.
And my point is, let's not give the wiggle of 2 to 3. Let's set a minimum, either 2 years or 3 years. And I think if we get 2 years, if we say it's a minimum of 2 years law enforcement experience or proven track record, then you get everybody.
Great point.
Because the 18 months would be a proven track record of exceptional service, which would be the alternate.
Okay. Paula.
I think this is a wonderful conversation, but I think it's going to go on much more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And I'm wondering, isn't there a question about when the next meeting is? Shouldn't we decide that before we lose a lot of people?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. Let's go with the next, well, it'll be the 18th, I believe. If I'm counting,
The question was whether it
20.
should be
I'm sorry, the 20th.
the 20th
the 20th.
or December 4.
With
And
the,
is it 20th? Is that the Saturday before?
that's a 2 weeks.
That's a Saturday before Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Oh, that's not going to work for folks, right?
Yeah, I'll be around, but a lot of people will be shopping, getting their
Okay.
turkey and everything, preparing for family to visit.
With the 27th, then
No,
3 weeks
No,
from
we'll be
now.
hungover from Thanksgiving. Are you crazy?
no. Yeah, that's right.
All right, then how about what did you say?
December 4 would be.
4th?
I know that I can't make that date, but if everybody else can, that's good.
I can't, but I'll make sure to empower someone with Zoom capabilities.
Oh gosh.
Well,
Yeah.
let's go backwards then. I mean, can you make the 27th or the 20th?
I
can
personally am
make
out
both.
the
I can
20th.
do the 20th. I can't do the 27th.
What
The
about the
20th.
11th? It's a little far off, but we are powering through it. December 11th.
That would be great.
Let's commit
I think if
to,
we push it that far back, there should be some deliverables
yes.
before then from the committee so that we are not working from this iteration of the document. There will be some additional things that we can comment on during that time if that's agreeable. Because
Yeah.
that's a large loss of time, but I understand, we know the holiday season does that.
Yeah, and I can't do the 11th anyway, so, but other people can, that would be fine.
You know what,
Uh,
guys? I'm sorry. I think.
So where are we then? Today's the 6th.
Hang on, Commissioner Harben Forte. Go ahead, Joe.
Hi, I think you guys are so close. I don't think you need to push this thing out a month. I feel like, sorry, but like when I first read the document today, I was like, this is great. You're like 90%. It just seems like maybe we should meet in 2 weeks and just be done before Thanksgiving. Give a gift to yourselves.
I can actually do the 20th. That would be better for me than any of the other dates that you named. If there was any flexibility, perhaps we could look at the time, because middle of the day does throw us off. But if we could do, I don't know, something a little earlier in the day or something a little closer to the evening, then perhaps we could capture some of those who may have traveled. They'll be settled by that time. Just something to consider.
Well, then do we have a consensus that we're going to go with the 20th for those who can make it? Seem like a consensus. Any particular hour that people would like versus 2 p.m.?
Can we do a doodle poll?
Rania, can we do a doodle poll?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
set it up. I'll set it up and send it out on Monday.
And then whatever the consensus is on time, then let's roll with it.
And what time should we definitely not include as an option on the 20th?
I'm going to start us off from about 10 in the morning
Yeah.
until 4. And that way people can pick, and I'll do it in 2-hour slots. So
Okay.
it will look messy, but we'll defer to the majority. And again, commissioners, I'll talk to you guys offline. I'm not here, but that shouldn't stop. Like, it's just logistics. I'll make this super easy.
Great. All right, so we're settled in for the 20th, and there'll be a doodle poll that Ronnie will put out. So we settle on an hour as well. I'm looking at 3:40. I'm just so happy with the kind of progress we made. We really powered through this, I think. And so again, and to Pastor Jackie's point, let's look for some deliverables, even though we're only talking 2 weeks. Let's really see what we can put together in terms of comments. We obviously haven't gotten through the entirety of the CRO roles and responsibilities, but certainly I'm sure people have some real thoughts around that that core issue of what do we want the CROs to actually do. So there's a whole lot of thinking, I think, that a lot of thoughts people have around that. So any kind of those thoughts, please just go ahead and put it down and send it out to everybody so that everybody can consider it. Yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. And by then I will hope to have a rewrite of section 1 of those first few sections where I've tried to synthesize all of the points and everything, but I think it's too long and there's certainly some redundancy in there.
Great. Okay. Unless there's any burning issues that people want to bring up or, magnificent quotes that they want to put out. If not, I'm going to go back and recomb my hair.
And thank you, Jose. Jose, as you all know, is officially off of the commission, but he will never leave community policing. He will be a community policing ad hoc member for life.
Thank you so
right.
much.
Congratulations for everything.
Once on the commission, always on the commission.
That's right.
So
All
thank
right.
you so
Thank
much.
you, Take care.
Rania putting this together, Brenda, of course, Joe, Paula, Nike, Pastor Jackie, and Lieutenant Febble. Thank you for taking the time in your Saturday. We all are busy. Appreciate it when you actually take time from your family. That's most appreciated. So thank you so much. And again, whatever thoughts you have, just go ahead and put them down and send it because I'm sure it'll have some real value for all of us. So
Yes.
again, thank you so much for
Thank you.
making this. And we're going to get together. Is that right? Afterward, Rania?
Let's stop recording and I'll find you both.
Okay. So